Hey everyone, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. Happy 4th of July to all of my American viewers, and maybe happy or not, we don't really know yet, to my viewers from the United Kingdom. Because in the United Kingdom there was just a big election and there was a major swing in favorability, and now there is a whole new party in charge. We're going to talk about it later today, but right now let's dive into what's happening in Ukraine and around Ukraine, because there has been a lot of headline discussions, and I also got my email inbox pretty much filled up with a lot of requests asking to explain why things are not stopping, why the situation is advancing. We start with the concept that we need to be very much aware of from the beginning when we're discussing everything that happens in Ukraine. The concept is called object permanence. That means that if Russians had certain units in a certain area around front line, so for example, Russians planned to advance to Kharkiv, and then they had some forces in reserve that they wanted to use to continue advancing towards Kharkiv and also continue advancing towards Sumy. But because Ukraine ruined their plans, then they stopped advancing. But this grouping here did not really go anywhere. Like, it didn't disappear from existence. It moved around, and they used the specific forces together with some of the other reserve forces to reinforce other directions on the front line in Ukraine. So when we are stating that, wow, Russia failed at Kharkiv, we are very clearly stating that the failure is specifically on that direction. Secondly, when we discuss that the situation is getting better for Ukraine, this is especially true for my channel because I oftentimes try to paint a picture that everything is not as bad, that there is also positive moments, that it's not only Russians are attacking and taking territory, that it's also Ukrainians counterattacking, that it's also Ukrainians preventing Russian plans and ruining them. But it doesn't mean that the situation suddenly changed from being really, really bad, where Ukraine was absolutely terrible, to being good. It's not. We just went, if you think about the specter, like think about it as a specter. If you have absolutely awful situation, like complete zero, nothing is working, to everything is wrong for the enemy, we are winning on all fronts, there we go, it's a total victory. Then in this spectrum, Ukraine moved a little bit towards the better side, but it doesn't mean that the situation is good yet. And a lot of people take it for self-understanding granted, and I'm basing it from the flood of emails that I got asked to me, essentially asking, Georgie, you were stating that Ukraine is doing so well, that they're fighting the Russians, but why do we see Russians still advancing and taking certain parts? And the answer is very, very simple. Because what means when the situation is bad, not terrible anymore, but bad, does not mean that Ukrainians will not lose territory. It does not mean that the Russians now are completely stopped at advancing. No, it means that Ukraine has now more opportunities, that Ukraine has more ability to counterattack. And more importantly, in practical terms, and this is something very, very important for us all to understand, is that for us, oftentimes war divulges into this drawing on the map, the arrow drawing. You know, Ukrainians attack here, Russians attack there, there we go, this village was taken, this village was not taken. In reality, what that means is that people at the front line get killed every day, that certain groups get encircled. So people will write on the social media stating how awful the situation is. They will write that, oh my God, this is like last message, we've been encircled and destroyed. That I just lost 7 friends to an airstrike. Or Russians have attacked me, help me someone, I don't want to die. All of that is parts of war. War is horrific. In all these 2.5 or even up to 10 years actually of the war, when we're talking about how people see the situation on their front line, especially when they are on the receiving end of an advancing enemy, it is never good. the situation is always terrible. It is always people losing lives, they losing limbs, they losing health, they cannot sleep, they always feel that they're outnumbered, they always panic, they always suffer, nothing ever works correctly. That is the horror of war. So when we're putting a map here, when we are going in here and stating, oh my God, Russians were able to attack and move up and take some of the positions from the Ukrainians around here, a lot of times we just say, oh, it's just, movement on the map. Or recently, when Russians were able to capture the district of Canal just a couple of days ago, where I said that Ukrainians were actually holding it quite well, people was like, Georgie, but you said that they were holding. Yes, because we are judging this by the situation on the map. Ukrainians that are on the ground are judging it like this. This is this channel district. This one, the circle, the red area on the map that Russians took. This is it. Now, I want you to look at this picture, and I want you to imagine, firstly, that you are a fighter, and you are then stuck in one of these houses or ruins of what used to be houses, and then an enemy is advancing towards you. There is little to no logistics that are possible here, right? How do you get additional resources, supplies to this area? There is no trees, everything is dead, nothing to hide from. And then secondly, imagine you're a commander in these units, and then you're stating, oh, we should probably counterattack into these ruins and fight for these ruins. It's not easy. So what I'm trying to get across is that the situation is a lot more complex than just Russia advanced and took some kind of district. The actual truth is, and again, you can argue on the numbers. I just want to underscore that the scale that we're talking about here is tens of thousands of troops. That for Russia to reach and take over this land of rubble and claim it for themselves, to color it red, so then people on the social media or watching this YouTube channel start sending me mails and stating, Georgie, Russians took the channel that you said Ukraine is fighting against, and I think you were wrong. This is a chain that we must always follow. So from movement on the map to the situation on the front line to actual what was the scale of resource cost. Because the scale for the resource cost for Russian is horrendous. And here we get to the third point that I want to make. It's very hard to talk about Russia without talking about the Soviet mentality and Soviet thinking. For a longer time, I really asked people to explain it to me. What does it mean to have the Soviet mentality for the command? Like, can you finally explain? So I can tell it to you and we can talk about it in simple terms. To put it in a simple terms perspective, it's lying. It's the Soviet mentality that everyone refers to is basically lying. It is stating that instead of having 5 tanks in your unit, you actually have 2 and one of them also not working. That instead of stating that you actually have a firm control of all 4 or 5 positions in your area, you actually control 3, and the second and third are actually kind of weakly, and you actually don't have enough man to fully staff them. It is stating on paper that you have about 100 soldiers, where in reality you have maybe 15 to 20. That is the Soviet mentality, and it is through and through the Russian military. So when certain analysts are looking at the situation on the front line and they are evaluating how well Ukraine is doing, what is the dynamic of Ukrainian improvement, and what is the speed of the Russian degradation of forces and where this is going, they are making estimations that I am then basing my estimations from. So when they're stating that, Russia doesn't have that many reserves. They have some reserves that are left from Kharkiv offensive. They have some reserves that they had in this area. They had some reserves in Donetsk. It's not a lot. If the dynamic that Ukraine is following right now will continue and Ukraine will get stronger, then at some point Ukraine can start not just counterattacking, but actually go into offensive. And it will be very dangerous for Russia to expand these forces. However, if the Soviet thinking is extremely constant in the Russian forces, they look at these resources and they don't look at the actual numbers. What they look is like essentially numbers on the paper. And these numbers appear on the paper because that's what is being promoted in the military, right? If you attack and you don't take a position, then you report the truth and say, like, I lost half of my unit. Then you're a bad commander. Now imagine if you decide to lie a little bit about. So instead of taking position, actually what happened in reality, that you attack, you got more than half of your units killed, but finally you were able to put a flag and now it's a gray area. But instead you write, we suffered minimal casualties and we took that position, and then you submit it upwards. Suddenly you have a great record. You become in this system a good and proficient commander. And by that kind of a system, this is the Soviet system we're talking about, people that lie and overestimate what they have going upwards for the command is what creates an unrealistic picture on the ground. The truth is that while Russians have these forces on the paper, in reality, they don't really. But because they are on the paper, they still consider as like, yeah, it's fine. Let's just do it. Let's just send it over. Let them attack. Let them just go forward towards Ukrainian positions and attack. Lose a ton of people, but still continue attacking. And I've been telling this many times, and I will continue repeating it. Russia and the resources that Russia is having are many times over the resources that Ukraine is having. If it would be a competent army, with all of my love to Ukraine, I don't think Ukraine would be able to hold. And only because Russian incompetence is there, even with all of the advantages in aviation. Look, Russia has enough aviation and firepower to still, despite the supplies from the Western forces, despite everything, to completely eradicate, destroy, make a field of rubble, moonscape, the whole districts of the cities. This is how they fight. This is how they're continuously fighting. And they are not going to stop until they are stopped. And that's why it's Russians that are having this advantage, having absolutely disgusting and really bad command structure, but they're continuously advancing, and they will continue advancing until Ukraine gets enough resources. And Zelensky is telling about the same things. A lot of times we are being talked about that, Ukraine receives a lot of resources actually, but the manpower is not there. And that's a bit nuanced question. Because in what happens in reality, and this is a different approach, and I talked about why this approach is there. It's because Ukraine wants to build some kind of a new type of army that they are looking to build, to have the army corps as their group. But the problem with that is that the current recruiting platform and approach for Ukraine, I'm not sure it's the best, but I am not a professional in the area and I don't know all of the plans to evaluate whether it's good or bad. Because what Ukraine is doing is they're calling in mobilization efforts. People that come in from mobilization, instead of being just funneled into the front line to go and reinforce existing units, they instead are put into the new brigades that are being formed and trained anew. So instead of being just a part of the reinforcements for the forces, they have now new brigades and new units. And they have the second parallel track, where the units and specific brigades are encouraged to seek recruitment from outside, to either pay money or find people that would like to work for them to fill position, essentially like LinkedIn for the specific brigades. And that's the second parallel stream. And the problem with this model, that it would work fine unless there would be certain Soviet mentality that I just took certain length to discuss. Because while at a lesser extent, it is still somewhat prevalent in Ukrainian military. So instead of stating the actual state of things for some of the brigades on the front line, there are certain commanders and generals and brigade commanders that are stating that the things are actually better for them than they actually are. And this creates very unfortunate situations when push comes to shove. Specifically when we talk of this attack that happened here, because the details are quite horrific. As now we know that I believe it was a battalion commander, but don't quote me on that, that was just reporting that they were actually having these positions and holding these positions, whereas in reality there was barely any people in the front lines. That there was positions where there was like, instead of 4 or 5 people on that specific position, there was like one guy standing. So it's an unfortunate situation, and this something needs to be done for Ukraine. They need to find maybe some kind of other approach. But again, I'm not a professional. It's just something I'm going to be monitoring. But it's worth to I always underline that whenever we're talking about problems in Ukrainian military, we should be careful how we're discussing this, because Ukrainian military so far outperformed their competitors. But there is room for improvement, and we must outline that room for improvement. Then let's talk about some of the political news. Orban has visited Kyiv and now went to Putin, and a lot of people put it like it's something important, and I just want to say, no, it's not. Orban is definitely a friend of Putin. I mean, he pretty much is Putin's agent. We should not take him seriously. Hungary has been an awful liability. Obviously, being Zelensky, we need to understand, and this is something, again, I want us all to remember, is that the ultimate goal that we want to have is for Ukraine to have just peace. So if getting towards that just peace would lead to talking with this pig dolphin over here, then for Zelensky, it's the option to go. He's a politician. It's his job to talk. So I don't look at this like this is some kind of problematic visit for Orban and that they talk together. I think it's great, and I think Zelensky is doing his job to talking with anyone just to continue advancing their narrative and promoting their position of having just peace in Ukraine. This is especially important because we're going to have on the 9th of July, from 9th to 11th of July, NATO summit. And on that NATO summit, there will be more discussions, and hopefully there will be a certain step and requirements outlined for Ukraine to start membership application. I don't expect Ukraine will be invited to join NATO yet, but we must understand that everything about NATO is going to be based around how Ukraine will win. If it's going to be unjust peace, then Ukraine will not see NATO. Ukraine will see no security guarantees. And this is something we all must work towards to dismiss and deny. And second option, if Ukraine wins very properly with the full support of the allies, kicks the Russians out, and Putin's regime will then go into free fall, that is when all of the doors will open for Ukraine, and Ukrainian people will see the future in civilized, democratic, and free society. Finally, in UK, there was an election, and election was very, very impressive. The Tory, the Conservative Party, has lost their majority to Labour. So the Tories lost 252 seats, and Labour gained 214 seats. So now they control 412 seats, whereas the threshold for controlling the Parliament or House of Commons is 326 seats. So it's a very, very comfortable majority that will allow them to govern. And the important question here that on everyone's mind in our context is, well, how are they the direction towards Ukraine? Well, the Keir Starmer announced his new UK government cabinet, and person who will be responsible for Ukraine is John Healey. So when it comes to UK defense, it starts in Ukraine, the MP told the House of Commons. So he is very pro-Ukraine. So the three immediate steps that they're looking to implement is speed up the delivery of air defense ammunition and long-range missiles and expand the training of Ukrainian troops, renew focus on diplomacy to strengthen international support for Ukraine, and seize Russian assets and close sanction loopholes. And to finalize this on a high note, I want to say huge thanks to everyone that donated to the Women Veteran Movement fundraiser that we did. We got over $32,500, which is incredible amount. Huge thank you from me to you. And I will also finish today's message with a video from the representatives of the Women Veteran Movement. And I will just tell you that we're going to try and throw the weight of this community and support from this community to fundraiser that Pete started before he got killed. This is a Project Constantine fundraiser, very ambitious one. I don't expect us all to raise, but we're going to see how much we're going to contribute. I will definitely be contributing a lot to this fundraiser. Thank you so much for watching this video. I love you. Slava Ukraini, and I'll see you next time.